Hello everyone. In this chapter, let's look at how do we actually validate the different rating models that we are developing for whatever purpose. And we have to understand there any model that we are developing, there is a possibility of a model risk. So that's the prime reason. Every model has to be thoroughly validated before it is put into implementation. So I'll talk about the process of validating the model. What is the role of internal validation units? So for every model validation, there should be an internal validation unit. So I want to talk about what is the key role of that. Then all the rating models that we are developing, there are different ways to validate them. So we are trying to differentiate between a qualitative way of validation versus a quantitative way of validation. Similarly, what if the quality of the data itself is not up to the mark? How do I really validate what is the goodness of the data that we are using to build the model? And then finally, we would also look at the calibration process. How do we validate the calibration process? And how do I really determine the discriminatory power of the rating model? So if you look at the overall process of validating any particular model, we have an internal rating validation model process. So the first step comes out as the architectural choice. So broad level architectural choice. I have to really assess whether it is meeting the requirement or not. The methodology used to build the model needs a validation. The overall process and the procedures. So you have to really look at the various records and the IT aspects of that, which is going as a first step. So before we get into the real model validation, we are looking at the design of the model, the architectural choice of that particular model, the methodology, the process that you are following, the various documents that are available. All those go as a part of the first step of the validation. And from there you are looking at whether you should move forward towards the qualitative or the quantitative validation. Though both of them are very much required, when you get into the qualitative process, we are looking at the model methodology, the structure, then you are focusing on data quality. How do you assess the quality of the data? And if at all the data's quality is not good, how do you work with it? And you are going more on the policies and the procedures as well. So the qualitative validation comes from the methodologies, data quality, procedures, processes. You are getting into the validation of all of them. Whereas when you are going into the quantitative validation, so you are building a model and the validation is performed. See, the model is built with in sample data. So if you have a data of, let's say, 100 records, you will first of all break it out into, let's say, 80-20. So 80 is called as the in sample data, the 20 is called as the out of sample data. So you will first build the model with only 80 of them, though you have 100 samples with you. You will build the model only with 80, that is what is the in sample, but you will observe the testing part using the out of sample, which is this one. So that's one way you can do the validation. The second thing is you can do a back testing. Any model that you have built, you test it back on the previous data. So look at what is the level of accuracy the model is generating, and create a kind of an internal benchmark, and based on that you can see to what extent the model is typically performing. So when you are building any kind of a model or when you are doing the monitoring of it, we need to understand the discriminant power of the model, how good it is in terms of predicting the out of sample data. So we are looking at ex post default frequencies to understand the accuracy of the model. Then we are also doing the calibration both for in the population as well as out of the population. So we are taking the data from the in the population as well as out of the population, seeing the calibration of the various parameters of the model. And the stability and the robustness over time is also one more thing that we are looking at. So all these again, the external benchmarking also can be combined, where you get the benchmark from outside, give that as an input to your process itself, and you can also give that as a part of your monitoring, and overall it can result in the overall assessment of the model. So this is how any model that you are building can be really validated. And if you see a few important things, we are talking about internal validation units and the different kinds of roles. Probably when I am talking about the various aspects, I need the models to be validated. I need the procedures. So for every model validation, I need procedures. I need a set of tools to do that. And finally, the management decision associated with that. So overall, when I am looking at the controls, I can classify them as basic controls, where the task is to develop a model and test it with the past data and see to a large extent it is adhering to the requirement. So the risk model development unit, which is developing the model, will be the major will take the major responsibility for model development and back testing of the model. Regarding the same, the procedures, there is a maintenance team. So you have to do the maintenance part of all the various procedures. So the internal control unit will take care of the maintenance of the procedures regarding the model development and the backtesting process. And when we talk about the tools, operation maintenance is the major tool, which would be taken care of by the IT or the internal audit team. And when it comes to in the management decision, the basic controls associated with the lending policy applications, so who need to be given a loan, who need not be given. So there could be a kind of centralization or a decentralization with respect to the various internal control units. But there could be second layer controls, where we are talking about the models need to be continuously tested, improvisations need to happen, the tools performance, how well the tools are able to give the decisions. So that entire thing is the responsibility of the internal audit team. And similarly, we are talking about suitability of the lending policy also need to be a kind of a management decision that needs to be taken, which also would be the responsibility of the internal audit team. But when it comes to the third layer, which is more of a management, senior management kind of a layer, we talk about COO, CLO. So if you are talking about for risk management, we need a chief risk officer. Risk management models will be taken care of by the chief risk officer. We have a chief operating officer taking care of organizational related decisions. You have a chief lending officer taking care of lending unit. So these are the kind of different kinds of decisions. We have the roles and responsibilities associated with the different departments. And final accountability for supervisory purposes is basically with the board of directors or even the senior management or the surveillance board. So this is how the internal validation for different kinds of artifacts happen: models, procedures, tools, and various decisions that are taken. So all the material aspects associated with the ratings as well as estimation processes, the board of directors have to really play a very important role, or they can delegate the task to some kind of a committee and the senior management to really approve all those material aspects. Material aspect means something which will have some kind of an impact on the financial outcome of that particular company. If it is not if it is not going as per the expectations. So it is expected that even the board of directors, they have a good amount of general understanding of the entire rating system that is implemented in the bank, and they should be able to understand the reports thoroughly. Similarly, when I look at it from a senior management perspective, everyone in the senior management, irrespective of whether they belong to the risk department or they don't belong to the risk department, they should have a very good understanding of the design of the rating system, how the rating system functions, what are the various formulas that are involved in the rating system, how does this rating system work, what are the various parameters or the factors which are driving this rating system. They should be able to understand the overall process, and any kind of changes that are coming across the various versions of the models, or whatever has been mentioned as a part of the procedures which is in the document versus actually implemented as a part of the model, any kind of discrepancies that are coming up, they should clearly highlight all those discrepancies, and based on that they have to give their approvals. So for them, their major job is to give that kind of an assurance that the rating model is operating properly. And when it comes to the real staff who are a part of the credit control function, they are meeting at regular intervals to see how the rating process is working, what are the loopholes in the current rating process, what are the areas of improvement for the same, and whatever are the improvisations that are taken up in the previous meetings, in the previous discussion, what is the status of all those meetings, what are the action plans out of them, what is the status of all those various action plans, and do we really have the real skills, appropriate skills to do that particular job. Do we really have skilled people to implement those models? So that is the kind of cross-checking that needs to be done by the management as well as staff who are a part of the credit control function. And finally, the internal audit function, which is an independent function, they are majorly responsible for separately validating the overall process and overall rating process, and even they are the ones who talk about the compliance with the various regulatory aspects. So that's how all the various internal validation units have to act together as a part of building extraordinary models. Now, coming to the various mechanisms that are there to validate the internal ratings. Qualitative, as I've shown in the diagram earlier. So when I'm talking about qualitative, their major role is whatever have been done by the quantitative methods. First of all, are they used in the right sense or not? And are they giving the right input or not? So instead of just going with the blind quantitative approaches for validation, we are talking about a qualitative approaches which talks about how well I am able to use the quantitative model. But when it comes to quantitative validation, we are talking about all the various procedures wherein statistically we are looking at the validation. When I say back testing, we are building a model and we are testing it with the various available historical data. So based on the empirical data set, I am building the model as well as doing the appropriate testing. So it cannot happen that both of them are done in isolation, or it cannot be like I'm using qualitative methods but I'll ignore the quantitative ones, or I'll use the quantitative methods but I'll ignore the qualitative ones. They have to complement each other. So I may implement quantitative methods and I get it validated with the qualitative mode of validation and so on. So when it comes to the qualitative validation, we are looking at design of the rating system itself. What kind of model architecture I am using, right? There should be, is the model completely transparent? The assumptions that I am using to build the model, the evaluation of the model, the procedures that I am doing to evaluate the rating model design, ensure that there is a lot of transparency in all these various aspects, right? So the main intention of qualitative validation is check, first of all, consistency. I'm using the similar kind of approach across the various products across time so that they can be comparable. So whatever the calibration of the output, from the output, whatever we got, if I have to link them to default probabilities, proper calibration, I have to ensure that adequate calibration is being done. Every model that we are doing, every calculation, every formula that we are bringing as a part of our model, I have to ensure that the documentation is adequate for the same. The whole process need to be well described. Who, and again, clear cut process in terms of who is responsible for what aspects of the process. What are the various duties as a part of the process and who is responsible for each of those duties. That's again one more important aspect that needs to be kept in mind. So the whole set of processes, when the reviews are going to happen, what is the frequency of the reviews, validation, the whole procedure should be in place. So essential requirements of the rating system needs to be checked. So I need to look at the probability of default, what all need to be collected to ensure a good probability of default. The completeness of the model should be there, objectivity, consistency. These are some of the various things that would be validated as a part of the rating system design and in the qualitative validation process. Similarly, the data quality is also being checked out as a part of the qualitative validation, because if I am giving garbage data as the input, the output that I am going to get is also a garbage output. So that is where I need to ensure that whatever the model that I am building, the data quality should be at most important. So if there is a kind of a poor quality in the data, it really does not work out adequately. Similarly, I need to ensure that the data needs to be complete, right? I need to ensure the completeness of the data. I need to see the volume of the available data, how much of data needs to be used to build a rating model. So all the samples, are they representing all the different kinds of scenarios or not? Representatives for various scenarios need to be taken into consideration, because if I don't have the various scenarios as a part of my data, then probably the output that I am going to get is also a more and more biased output. And what is the authenticity of the various data sources from which I am collecting the data? What is the integrity of those data sources? What are the procedures that I am following to do the cleaning of the data? So all these things really need to be taken care as a part of the qualitative validation part of the model. Then the next thing that we are looking at here is what are the key challenges that are associated with the data quality. So as we have already talked about, the validation unit is very much responsible to ensure that the quality of the data that is going as an input to the model is very appropriate. So we need to ensure that the data is complete in all aspects and the data is coming from reliable sources. And if I am having large data sets, what is the authenticity of those data sets, right? What is the actual limit for them, especially when I want to use them for development, rating quantification, develop quantitative rating models, do validations, etc. So what is the probability of default? I need to have a proper definition, and that definition needs to be consistent, throughout the data collection process, right? Because when I am talking about a person defaulting, what is my definition of defaulting? So that I will categorize that particular person or that particular institution is defaulting. So I have to have a clear-cut definition of what is meant by default so that the data can be collected appropriately. What is the time span for which I am going to collect the data? Is it for 1 year, 1 month, 2 years? So generally it is suggested that the entire credit cycle related data needs to be collected. Then the data treatment is another important aspect that needs to be focused on. Are there any kind of abnormal values, extreme values, outliers as a part of the data? Are any variables having some of the values missing? In some cases, when we are getting the data from some third party sources, it might so happen that for some of the variables, some records may be very much empty. Especially for some kind of situations, the customers may not have updated their data for some of the variables. So that would be a major challenge. So I need to have a mechanism on what all data cleaning activities I need to focus on, right? And how do I do a proper calibration of the parameters? And finally, with the model that I have built using in-sample data, how do I really test it using out of sample? How do I validate it using out of sample? So what are the various technology related changes, especially with respect to lending processes? What are the technology related changes? What are the kind of misalignments between the borrower's profile, especially when the lending has been done versus today? What are the changes in the profile of the borrowers? Any misalignments? So all these things, so there should be a lot of stability in the lending technology behind the data. Calibration models need to be proper to generalize the results from the sample to the overall population. So these are some of the challenges with respect to the data which need to be taken care as a part of the building more and more appropriate and suitable models. Then once the data quality related validation is done, we are looking at the calibration aspect of the model. So I'm looking at the data gathered from the operational deployment of the model. Whatever the parameters that are typically getting modeled, they can be constantly monitored and validated so that the probability of default that are coming out, they are more or less in line with the real world scenarios. Now this is where I have to talk about what is the discriminatory power of the model. So I'm talking about the accuracy of the rating assignments. Whatever the rating task that we have done, I am focusing on the accuracy of that rating assignment, wherein the model needs to have a capacity to rank the various borrowers based on their risk levels. So overall sample they should be able to do the ranking, and even in terms of breakdown they should be able to do the ranking. So what is the level of accuracy they are able to classify the various borrowers into different levels based on the risk associated with each of the obligors. So there should be clear-cut differentiation between those borrowers who are defaulted and those borrowers who have not defaulted. So at least for the entire forecasting horizon, there should be clear-cut differentiation between these two sets of so the more is the difference that is existing between the parties, the more is the discriminatory power of the model. So I have to use longer forecasting horizons so that I can validate the discriminatory power. There are so many statistical mechanisms to do that, right? I can use Fisher's R-squared, Wien's lambda, Homer-Lemishev's test, or I can use migration matrices, various accuracy indexes, Lorentz concentration curve, Gini ratios, various kinds of classification tests like your chi-square test, binomial test. All these are the various methods that can give me the accuracy of the model or the discriminatory power. Is the model able to differentiate between the defaulters versus the non-defaulters? What is the level of accuracy associated with the model in terms of distinguishing between the categories? That is what we are calling as the discriminatory power of the model. Whereas when I am using the word calibration, I am more interested in the predictive power of the model in terms of computing the probability of default. Right? When I am saying calibration of the model, my intention is to compute the probability of default and to what extent the models are comfortable in terms of predicting the probability of default. Here, the biggest problem is the statistical tools that are available, they are not that excellent in doing this kind of a prediction. So compared with the evaluation of the discriminatory power, today the calibration related validation, they are at much preliminary stages itself. And one thing we have to understand is validation unit has a very important role in verifying the central tendency over time. How is the central tendency moving over time through various processes like backtesting, stress testing, etc. Now, a few more things relating to calibration. Benchmarking can be a valuable complementary tool for valuation of estimates. So I can benchmark the probability of default, the loss given default and exposure at default. I can compare the actuals with the benchmark values. So we are trying to find out the discrepancies or the differences. When I am saying I am validating the calibration, my objective is to find the discrepancies or the differences between what I have called as a benchmark and or probably what I have treated as my forecast versus the actuals. Instead of this forecast, I can even set my benchmarks also. So whatever is the kind of a difference between the actuals and the predicted could be a simple benchmark or it could be a model that is using a model I have forecasted a particular value for probability of default. Now again for calibration also we have different kinds of tests. I can go with a binomial test, chi-square test, normal test, traffic lights approach. When I look at the binomial test, especially if I am talking about one rating category at a time, I can use a binomial test, something like your logistic regression model or a discriminant analysis model, which is more like a binomial test where you are validating one rating category at a time. But if you want to check multiple rating categories at a time, the the predicted, the forecasted versus the actuals, in that case, the extension of the binomial test is coming out to the chi-square test. So normal test also you can apply to a single rating class, but it is a multi-period test of correctness of default probabilities. So when I am using it over a multi-period model, then the normal test is better. Even the traffic light approach is also a kind of a multi-period kind of a backtesting route for a single category. So normal or even the traffic lights approach can be used for validation of the calibration models. Now, overall, if you are looking at validating rating systems, some of the fundamental activities, one we have backtesting, where the intention is whatever the parameter that you have estimated, you want to check the accuracy of the parameter or what is the level of discrepancy between the actual versus the estimated. So that is one thing you are doing as a part of the backtesting process. And when we are saying benchmarking, we are looking at the relative performance of the systems versus the benchmark. Whatever is the parameter, you are comparing it with respect to, we are creating a benchmark for the same and we are trying to validate the actual values with respect to the benchmarks. And when we are applying stressed values and based on that looking at the output of the system, So those are coming under the stress testing process. So these are the three different kinds of activities that you can really get in for the validation of the rating system. So these are some of the important things that I wanted to cover as a part of this session. Any further queries you have, you can very well get in touch with me by giving me a call on the number that I have given below, or you can mail me at the email address provided below. Thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.